And one of the questions I had working with learning disabilities for a long time is, can somebody who has severe autism, right at the extreme end of the autistic spectrum disorder, and one of the diagnostic features of severe autism is that they can't relate to others, can this person relate to God? Can they find a relationship with God when they don't find it incredibly difficult to have a proper relationship with other human beings? And this was something I was praying and asking God, and usually God sent the answer, and the answer was yes, you can, because about 3 or 4 years ago we had a lady come to talk at one of to the staff, a training session for the staff, who had severe autism. Now, what had happened with her is she had been taken along to a church, and she had had a supernatural encounter with God where God was very, very real to her. And but something extraordinary happened to her at this time. She suddenly found she could speak. Now,
instantly.
Yes, it came on really, really fast. And most of us remember the Dustin Hoffman film, Rain Man, which was about this person with severe autism who had the ability to do numbers and could do this super calculation of numbers. Well, this lady, they call them avants, and this lady suddenly developed this extraordinary ability to use words and explain words. And she is now used in a lot of conferences. A lot of people have met her because she's able to explain what it's like to what it's like to live as an autistic person. In other words, when we communicate to them, they hear something different, and they don't comprehend the complicated language. And an example she gave was that one of the carers will say, "Well, let's all go swimming now in the minibus," meaning we're going to go to the bath through the minibus. Whereas an autistic person would sit there working out, how are we going to fill the minibus with water
and then swimming.
And so it causes a big confusion. So they misinterpret the way we speak. And as part of training now has been that we need to learn how to communicate in much more simple, monolithic objectives to communicate. But this lady herself, the very interesting thing is because she's got a personal experience with God. Now, she's still severely autistic. She still has all the autistic problems and behavioural problems. But God was able to break through her autism, which I found very encouraging. And since then, I've met quite a number of others who have a deep relationship with God, even though they find it very difficult to relate with others. And I think that's absolutely amazing.
It's terrific, isn't it? And it's because God deals with the spirit, and he goes. Yes, he does use our mental faculties. Yes. Of course, we read his word, we listen to his word, but he can move beyond that if that person themselves is unable to read or unable to hear. He can go direct to the spirit if necessary.
That's right. I mean, we are whole people, and of course we do live in physical bodies, and our physical bodies do have problems, and sometimes those are brain problems. I mean, the man, for instance, the person who did the story of the Rain Man was made on was a real person. Was based on the person as a real person.
That's right.
And this guy has 2 left brains. That's why he had this computer-like brain. He doesn't have a right brain.
Right.
He can't relate to others. There's no linkage between the two. And this is what they found when now we're able to look at brains much more effectively and understand how they work. And certainly there's a whole section of people with autism who have got abnormal structures in their brains. They're not like yours and I, so they don't function normally. But actually, they are still whole people. They may have the computer bit of them, maybe not functioning like you or I do. But
few circuits gone wrong there.
But the rest of them, and as a person, God can still break in and somehow get in. Although their ability to listen and function will be different.
And this is the key, isn't it? We've got an email already in June, and we'll open the phone lines in just a minute, which I'll bring out because it brings out some interesting points. of what's happening at the moment. But what you have got with these people is we would look at them and say they're in some way abnormal. I mean,
Yes.
because they're not like me. And you cannot see that in actual fact there's a very simple reason, as it were, why it is that. Something, you could be born with a physical disformity which is so obvious to everybody, they know it. This is a deformity which is inside and you can't see it. But they're no less a person and no less a creation of a loving, of a God who loves them.
Absolutely. We sometimes have this image that everybody should be like this perfect human being, and that's the goal, that everybody could be. But actually, God loves all His creation, and He loves each individual the same. And so, someone with severe learning disabilities, or who've had brain damage, or what have you, can be just as much, and certainly, that's what the Bible teaches, they're just the same in the eyes of God than anyone else. And in my experience, working with some people with learning disabilities, they seem to have a more passion for God than many Christians do.
Yes.
And because it's not cluttered up with all the thinking and the brain issues
Yeah,
that many of us have.
it's simply.
And one of the things at Prospects, I've been impressed with them, they're developing this whole area and developing ways, but it needs a bit of education, how you communicate with people, a bit of training on how to, what people need, and you need a bit of awareness that they don't function like you or I, so you shouldn't expect them to respond exactly like you or I do.
Yeah, so in other words, I mean, the first thing we need is a loving heart, isn't it? The first thing we need is to accept that person in, as part of family, and that's the first thing we need to do. Secondly, we may then need to recognise, I don't know, I want to communicate with that person, but I don't know at this point how to do it. So I will spend some time finding out. I will get trained. And Prospects is www.prospects.org.uk.
Right.
We'll make sure that goes to the office so you have that, but it's prospects.org.uk. And so you will go to such an organisation and say, look, we've got these people. I want to be able to communicate them. Would you help me do that? And I think it's so important that there are people with a heart that would reach out to such ones.
Well, if God's calling people to set up sort of house groups for this group of people, and certainly I think there is something, and a lot of them feel much happier relating to people like themselves because than relating in a normal setting. Now, there are obviously plenty of people with learning disabilities who are very happy being in a normal group. But if you want to do something like this, Prospects do have regional reps who will go around and do the training and help people who, if that's a burden you have, to set up a group. And the exciting thing I have seen is that many non-Christians come along here, and of course many people with learning disabilities find God in their heart genuinely, as well as coming along to a meeting. They actually have their lives changed, even those that are in secular organisations.
Right.
And it's been exciting and thrilling to see that, and to see people finding sort of peace and joy in God, and they can have a trust. We were talking about earlier about trusting God. I would say that a lot of people who are Christians find it much easier to trust God than
with learning disabilities.
With learning disabilities in their normal function of life than you or I.
Jill's email is interesting, and it reminds me of something. I just picked up again another news story of a couple of days ago where they've actually are pioneering a new way of testing the embryo in the womb as to whether it's Down syndrome or not. And it's not so pervasive, and it's done with the DNA, etc. It's much more easier to find out if that person is. And of course, the problem with that is it's much more easier than to say, I don't want this child. And just to add to this, I mean, Jill is saying that there's quite a lot of legislation that is going through that seems to be working against people with mental problems or with disabilities. For instance, he says the Mental Capacity Act allows for non-therapeutic research to carry out on mentally incapacitated people without their consent.